All right, guys, I am here with none other than TierZoo, recent Streamy Award winner for what, best educational channel ever,
Oh
something like
yeah,
that.
here it is. Here it is right here. You can see it. There it is. Yeah, best in education in 2023.
That's awesome. And yeah, very
Thanks.
well deserved. I think people are going to think that this is an unexpected collab, just like people thought it was an unexpected collab when you came on my channel. What, it was 2020, so
Crazy how time goes. Yeah, but I get that a lot actually. I'm always showing up in weird places actually, doing random collabs. But I like it because I like people. So
so you and I have talked back and forth, like just a little bit here and there since the collab. I first of all have to say to my audience and to you, when I reached out to you for the collab 3 years ago, I did so because you had commented several times on my videos. And I was like, okay, so first of all, I'm glad that he's not mad that I'm also making tier list videos just about different things. But second of all, I kind of just assumed that you and I were in a really similar like philosophical camp since you
uh
were commenting. So when I reached out to you, I just kind of assumed that you weren't religious. And then I learned that you were Christian.
yeah.
And so I have to ask, like, how did you find my channel? Why would you watch my like Skeptic atheist YouTube channel?
I can actually remember exactly how I found your videos. And it's through but I don't know if he's a friend of yours or if he just knows of you or whatever. But I'm friends with someone else. His name is Tim Blay. He does a channel called Acapella Science.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember watching a video of yours that was shared by Tim, who I think also went through a similar deconversion process and became an atheist. And he shared that as a way to like sort of explain this was kind of similar to my experience, this and that. And I watched it and I thought it was interesting. I remember I wrote a comment, which I didn't post. I like typed it up and it was really like critical. And I was like, I shouldn't post this. But I remember exactly what I wrote. So your video was about, you explained how you had a religious experience and then still became an atheist. Like you felt like you would adamantly profess to having felt God's presence or something like that. And then but that wasn't, how should I put this? Like that you later on were able to like recreate that experience through like meditation or something like that. And in doing so, like you were able to find some other peace or gain a similar benefit from that. I don't know exactly, but I remember typing out a comment and I didn't post it. And I'm glad I didn't because I shouldn't be picking beef with YouTubers or whatever, especially right before a global pandemic or whatever. But I wrote something along the lines of like, just because people with brain cancer sometimes smell toast, that doesn't mean toast isn't real. And I was like,
Okay.
that's probably not it's probably not good to compare atheism to cancer. That's a little disrespectful. So I just deleted it. And then I just kept watching your videos because I did find them like interesting. I like to kind of challenge my own beliefs, watch people whose worldview is very contrary to my own. And yeah, I just kept watching. And eventually you did post some stuff that was in a similar vein to the videos I was already
Yeah.
making with the whole tier list shtick and that. And I thought that was funny. I thought it was a really clever way to engage with the concept and all that. So yeah, that's where we eventually got more acquainted, introduced and everything. And we started messaging back and forth about all that. But I can understand why you would think, I'm commenting on the atheist video. Surely I must be watching because I agree with it, because that's
Yeah.
how people do. They watch people who say things that they like to hear, and I do too. But also I like to engage with other worldviews too. So
Well, I appreciate you, continuing to watch. I think that, now I'm used to having a more diverse audience. Like I have regular commenters and like, people who support me on Patreon and friends and stuff who
yeah,
are like Christian or Muslim or like polytheist or like just something, I am not. And it feels very normal. but in
Okay.
something like late 2019, early 2020, my channel, I probably had some like religious viewers, but it was mostly kind of like an anti-theist channel, and so it was a bit more like people who were wanting to exclusively criticize religion that would watch. So I think back then, yeah, I just would have made that assumption. Oh, no one would really like put much effort forward to watch this stuff because it's really all it is. It is just critical.
Yeah. Well, and that criticism is valuable even from, I think even from the perspective of a Christian, it's valuable to hear criticism because a lot of it is, of course, very valid. You know, I would see you make videos about like what to look for in a cult sort of environment, what sort of behaviors the worst of the worst, I guess, exhibit. And that's good to know because you want to look out for that, even when you're in a church or whatever your own religious environment is.
Well, that's good. I'm glad, and that kind of leads me to ask, you know, this video that I proposed to you originally, thinking that you were not religious. I said something on Twitter, like in Twitter DMs, and was like, "Hey, so I want to do this video that's kind of like whether or not religion is a bug in the system, like an evolutionary byproduct that basically means it's a bug that the devs didn't like, you know, buff out, whatever.
They didn't patch it out.
Fix,
Yeah.
They need to patch it out. Yeah. And I kind of communicated like that's what the video is going to be about, like that it's a bug. And you were like, I don't really know that I think religion is a bug.
Right. I was like, I don't
think-
know about that, Drew.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, okay, wait, no. So, and I laid out what the video actually was because I kind of miscommunicated. And it was just like, this video is putting forward a couple of sociological and psychological theories for how religion, like what purpose religion serves as far as like evolutionary benefit. You know, is it an evolutionary kind of byproduct, or is it something that aids groups in, you know, reproducing and growing? And I was like, I want to do this in kind of your style. Why would you agree to that? Why would you agree to help me with that?
Well, for a few reasons. The first was that you asked very nicely. You were kind of nervous, I think, about being seen as a copycat or whatever, and I wanted to kind of make sure that that people knew I wasn't gonna grumble about people using the same lingo, especially when it's a totally different topic. You know, I'm talking about zoology. You're talking about philosophy and religion and theology and all that stuff, and sociology for this video, I guess. So I didn't want. You were like, look, if I don't get you on this, like people are gonna call me a copycat. I'm like, well, okay, like we can work something out. It's okay. And I did think it was an interesting concept to talk about the zoological element of it, whether or not animals could experience religious events or cultural events or things like that, especially like as you get into the higher intelligence animals. So I thought it was an interesting thing to engage with. I still didn't really quite know exactly what you were gonna say in the video. I think you eventually sent me a script, but yeah, I didn't quite. I don't know if I quite got it. But I was just like, well, okay, I don't know about all that whole sociology, like bug in a code, all that stuff. But I was like, well, I could talk about the animals. You know, that's what I'm that guy. I'm the animal guy. So
Yeah.
I'll just do that. You can do your own sociology thing, and we can go off from there, and it's fine. So.
Well, you did a great job, and I have to say that I got a lot of comments, like dozens, hundreds, maybe 1,000 comments on that video that said, I thought this was TierZoo's channel at first, but then TierZoo's actual voice came on and the video got infinitely better. They did not like my voice. Your viewers and people who are clicking to see you definitely preferred you, which is like, let's be real. That's another reason to bring you on, right? Is because it's like it's a really good draw. You're huge now, but you were growing so fast at that point that it was like
True.
Yeah,
That was crazy.
This
yeah.
is a way to get a successful video.
Well, I'm glad it worked out for you. I think that's partially on you, to be fair, because you changed the thumbnail to be very much in line with my thumbnail aesthetic at the time. So, on some level, I think we were baiting the TierZoo audience a bit. Well, you were anyway. So
Yeah. Hey,
it worked.
I am just, if people learn nothing else about you, about Patch from this discussion here, it's that you're very forgiving and charitable. So I appreciate that.
Well, sure, I guess. Thanks. I'm glad it comes off that way.
Okay, so I was wondering about kind of your community's response to the video, because I remember one time, I think you DM'd me on Twitter, it was like a few months later, and I don't know if you had posted like publicly on Twitter or if you just sent it to me, I can't really remember, but you were basically like, yeah, like some subset of like, I think Christian Twitter was very upset that you worked with like this like cringy Reddit atheist. And even though the video wasn't a cringy Reddit atheism, you know, I think people had a certain perception of like what my channel must be and what your part must have been in it. And I remember like apologizing to you, like, I'm sorry that people are like upset at you for working with me. And you were like, I don't think they've even watched the video, so I'm not really upset.
No, that's exactly it. It was clear that they had not. It was clear that two things. One, they thought that it was my video because of the thumbnail aesthetic. And two, that they hadn't watched it. They didn't know actually what it was about. And so they just saw the title, which was a bit, I don't know, maybe inflammatory, or it wasn't even the title. It was just like the thumbnail text. And that was like blowing up on Christian Twitter. It was like specifically Catholic Twitter. I remember that. And it was like, I was suddenly getting a lot of comments saying some, well, things I'm not going to repeat, language that I wouldn't use, but, yeah, a lot of unwholesome comments, about my atheism. And I'm like, well, guys, first of all, I'm not an atheist. I probably am more aligned with your worldview than Drew's. But also, why are you guys doing this? This is absolute clownery. So I did not appreciate seeing that realm of Christian Twitter act in such a way.
That's Twitter. Like any group, like however wholesome you feel like their cause is, like will see a thumbnail and freak out and then rile each other up more and more. So it's like, it's certainly not a Christian Twitter exclusive type of behavior.
Definitely not. Yeah. No, it's just the internet. It's how it goes, and that's okay.
Yeah. Now, what about like in your actual church or in your community more broadly? Was there any type of reaction? Did people know about the video?
A few people saw it. Yeah. I got kind of mixed comments. Some people were like, wow, you really like laid down. You like didn't defend the faith at all. And some people were like, oh, that was like really cool how you engage with this side of everything. So it was mixed, and that's okay, you know, and not everyone has to agree. But yeah, that's about how it went. I certainly didn't face any consequences or anything. It was just a few comments here and there.
Well, that's good. I'm glad. And I do have to say that indicates that you know, you're part of a church community that seems considerably more healthy and uplifting than the one that I, you know, grew up in. And I've been in church communities that were more like yours sounds like it is now. Since then, like when I was in college, things were a lot more wholesome. But growing up, yeah, I'd be like, if people found out you were even watching, like if you had ever watched a video of mine, like an atheist YouTuber, you know, things would be bad. Like you'd have to have a meeting with the pastor or something about how serious your transgression was, you know.
Well, I'm sorry that you went through that environment. It doesn't sound pleasant.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is what it is. We try to, I think I used to think that that's kind of just what religion was, and now I have a different view of it. And this is kind of the next thing I wanted to get into. Because of the research that I did for our collab, I eventually went from being an anti-theist, like someone who thinks that religion is just all harmful and kind of just needs to disappear completely, to someone who thinks that, like, yeah, religious harm does exist, and I'm sure that you and I could both point to like harm that religion has caused here and there and whatever.
Right.
But just to say religion is just completely harmful and all forms of religion need to be eliminated, that's like a different statement. And I don't uphold that anymore. In fact, I'd call myself a pluralist. So if someone, is religious, if someone believes in God and they are contributing to their society, or if they are helping people, if they are doing good, if they are mentally healthy, they're not spreading like ridiculous misinformation for the sake of their religion, all those kinds of things, then that's great. And I actually think that religion can aid people in building communities and helping communities cohere, especially. I think not all, but several forms of religion throughout time have been very good at helping people build more cohesive communities. And that has to do with this book, The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, that I talked about in our collab. So, I don't know if you joined me in this video to be a bright, shining light unto a dark world, the atheist, darker world. But at least doing this video with you did eventually change my position on religion pretty significantly.
Wow. To be honest, the possibility of changing your mind never even crossed mine, actually. I was like, yeah, I'll just do this. Like he's who he is, and that's fine. He's that. But that's cool that you found all this new knowledge and applied it to your worldview and all that. That's really cool. And I think that's a very respectable, defensible worldview. I mean, seeing all the people in my life that I know who benefited positively from religion, and people who as you mentioned, like there is religious harm for sure. So yeah, I think like a neutral view, I guess, like not a positivity, not a negativity, but just like this can work for some people, and be good for them. It's a cool worldview.
So you had told me that when you were a bit younger, you had like a more strict worldview of like, you kind of need to be this type of person or else,
yeah,
you're not great. But you kind of communicated that you feel not quite the same way as you did, and there's been some kind of change in the past like several years as
it's true,
grown
definitely. I think growing up, this was something that I just saw example after example after example of people who decided that they no longer believe in God, and then proceeded to like completely and utterly and irreparably derail their life, like immediately. Like they would just make the worst choices, make the most impulsive decisions imaginable. People who I'd seen as like really like upstanding, solid characters, and then they were just unrecognizable. So that was my experience growing up, like all throughout childhood and my teenage years. Like if somebody decided that they were an atheist, that was like, ooh, it's about to be a show. But since then, I've encountered many more people like yourself who are much more tempered and I don't know, don't derail their life, I guess, when they make that sort of decision for themselves, which has definitely like tempered and created, I think, it's forced me to like kind of be a bit more humble about religion and be like, okay, like clearly, even though I think it works, the way that I was raised works very well for me. I don't think that's necessarily the only thing that can work. And clearly, having seen examples of other people living very great lives without it. So, but that is how I like grew up. Like I saw example after example. It was just like, if you made that choice, it was gonna be wild. So yeah, that's where I started, and that's where I'm at now for sure.
I really don't know that you can blame either one of us for seeing the things that we did growing up. I was all in on like religious fundamentalism, and when I saw people, go through negative things, it was always like, well, there must have been some sort of kind of closet sin, and that's why, the bad thing happened. And then getting older, I get to the point where I can kind of think for myself, and I'm not living at home anymore, and I'm like, that person like died of cancer instead of getting chemo because they thought the only thing that would work was prayer. And so, and just things like that, the situations that were actually more common that made me see like religion very negatively were people trying to solve family issues with like pastoral counseling alone, when the real issue was that somebody really needed medication, or that, just doing devotionals every morning with your kids isn't going to be sufficient to have your child overcome trauma that they faced when they were assaulted, or something like that. Like, I saw example after example of religion being the whole solution to someone's problem, when really, if it was going to be any part of it, it needed to be a part of it, not the whole thing. And so for me, it's like, oh, religion always poses as a like complete solution, when in reality, it's not always a complete solution. It's often not a complete solution, especially if there's a medical issue. And so, for me, my experience is like, oh, that means that like religion must be bad. And
Sure.
it sounds like, yeah, just encountering counterexamples. I've talked about many times that encountering a counterexample of a very religious polytheist friend of mine, and seeing how healthy his life was and how great his community was, I was just like, oh, huh. Well, that's staring me in the face. And eventually I came around to be like, okay, there are also Christians who go about things in a healthy way. It's not just like atheists and
so.
polytheists are good and everyone else sucks. It's like, no, I mean, I say we should evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, whether or not this is a good thing for someone. I don't know. What do you think about that?
A case-by-case basis. Well, yeah, I think that's fair. I wouldn't. I mean, obviously, I'm more pro like give religion a try than you. But this is something that I guess I've seen a few times here and there in my church community and other church communities, of people trying to kind of convert other, like people who already have their spiritual needs met, and are like trying to convince them, no, it's not enough, like you need more. And like, for example, trying to convert someone who's already going to another church. It's like, is that necessary? Do they have a good thing going? Do they have people in their life that love them and care about them and want to make sure they're safe and all that? Do we need to be pulling them away? Probably not. So yeah, I think in that regard, I could agree, like, a case by case basis, I suppose.
Now, what if someone is believing that animals can commune with the devs? What if someone thinks that an elephant has unlocked the prophet prestige class? I was saying this because these were lines that you said in our collab, like, in the future, as evolution continues, will these very intelligent animals eventually be religious in some way? Will they engage in religious practice? Is this, how much of a joke is this? How much do you think like that's a possibility somewhere in the far future?
I would love for scientists to study that more, because animal intelligence is really fascinating. I have no idea. It was a joke when I wrote it, but like if it turns out that animals have way more going on than we can really realize, that's cool. I would love to learn about it and see what new avenues of spirituality that brings and all that. But yeah, I really have no idea. All I've heard is like a few examples of like elephants burying their dead, I think, which is like one of the things that I think like anthropologists would view as the birthplace of like culture, is communities that do that for their, like, in ancient history, like millions of years ago, ancient humans would do that kind of thing. And that's a significant step towards like a tribe or a community or something like that. So I don't know. I was definitely being facetious and all that, but I still thought it was an interesting thought, and I hope that there's more research someday about it.
Some people take really hard theological stances on this stuff, and some people, not so much. They're like, it just remains to be seen. It's like the idea of, okay, if aliens came to Earth and they were intelligent, like they got here in a spaceship,
Yeah.
Would they have souls? Would Christ have died for them as well? Would they have some different system? I don't know. Any thoughts on that type of thing?
I mean, I would say emphatically yes. I would not. It wouldn't even be a question for me. I would ask them like, do you guys have this on your planet? Did you come and did he show up there too? All that stuff. Because that would be a really interesting discussion. But I don't know. I don't really think that. I don't really believe in aliens either. So I don't know. But it's an interesting thought for sure. What do you think about the aliens? Do you think they're gonna have their own god?
Yeah,
do you believe in aliens? First of all, I guess I could ask that.
So I'm kind of the opinion that as far as what we understand about the basically infinite vastness of the universe, I think it's probable that there's some kind of life out there, whether it's life that we would compare to ourselves. I mean, I don't know. Maybe. Like, it's ultimately, it's one of those things that it's like, yeah, I think that it's probably out there, but do we have any direct evidence of this? No. It's really just it's an educated guess based on probabilities, where we don't even have all of the probabilities like figured out. You know, we don't have everything entered into the equation. So how I don't know.
Drew, you're gonna get a bunch of comments now about aliens in your comment section. There's gonna be like, did you see the Tic Tac fly through the air? That was on the Joe Rogan podcast or whatever. Like, people are into this stuff, man. There's a whole community that you just set off.
Yeah, no, it's true.
We'll
I mean, that stuff is, you know, it's interesting, but I think for me, my my epistemology is like it's really boring. It doesn't really allow me to just like get it really excited and jump on board with stuff very quickly.
Yeah. I have very little confidence that any of the evidence that I've seen for aliens holds any water.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But I will say, if we had a situation where we had aliens contact us and they use something like language, and they, especially if they were social, if they were a social species, I would say that it's most likely that they'd have some kind of set of behavior that we would call religious. Would they have gods or something? I don't know.
I wonder if you would see people convert to the alien religion.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. I mean, it's, you know, this might be a hot take for you, but I think that a lot of the time when people go out and they go on missions, sometimes indigenous people will look to the missionaries who came, and the missionaries are very healthy. They live long lives. Like they have really nice teeth, you know, like they're rich and pretty and all these things that an indigenous person might, you know, think, hey, that's a sign of success. And then be like, okay, I'm going to listen to what they have to say, because I would also like to have this nice of stuff. I would also like to have, you know, these kinds of resources. And so if we had aliens contact us and they were doing well enough to get to us somehow, then I think people would absolutely convert to alien religion.
That would be really interesting. I think I have heard a story of like some uncontacted tribe that like started worshiping some people who just happened to like crash land there or something, and had like really advanced technology compared to them. I don't know if that's true, and if it's not, like, I'm not advocating that people who live in tribal societies are stupid or whatever, but
right.
It's an interesting phenomenon for sure that you could definitely see if someone shows up with technology light years advanced, that you'd want to figure out what they've got going on. So
a bit of a related note here is I made this video just in the last year that was talking about the science behind why people are convinced of religion or convinced to believe in supernatural agents. And it kind of, one of the statements that I made at the end was, the research shows that it doesn't really matter what you say to someone. The behavior that you display, basically you practice what you preach, you walk the walk, and you kind of have costly sacrifices that you display in your everyday life that come as a result of your, you know, religious practice. Those are the things that convince other people to believe. So you can be a great storyteller, you can be a great theologian or apologist and have great arguments, but ultimately research kind of bears out that the arguments aren't going to be as important as actually being a person who appears to practice what they preach and to do so even at a cost to themselves at times. You said in the comments that was one of your favorite videos of mine, which I was happy to know that you'd even seen enough of my videos to have like a favorite. But why is that? I never asked you.
Well, for a few reasons, but I think in addition to that whole thing in your video, you also kind of talked about how one of the biggest predictors of religiosity in a community was instability, like war and famine and like really terrible things, right? And so I think like viewing that whole thing through a religious lens presented what I would call like a pretty encouraging view of the purpose of religion. I think it's good to practice what you preach, but also I think that whole thing about, well, religious communities spring up in times of strife and people seek out religion when things are difficult. I think I kind of took that as like a calling, like this is a responsibility for a Christian. So like on two different levels, like one, it means that like the decline of religion in the developed world is like a sign of prosperity. It's like a sign of good times. It's a symptom of success, which I think is the case with a lot of our modern issues. But on top of that, it gives Christians like, first, it would give Christians peace of mind to say like, well, okay, sure, maybe you're seeing numbers go down, but that's like a good thing. It means the world is very healthy. But it also gives you like I guess I already said like responsibility, like just the thought of like, well, that might not last. You know, the world is an unstable place. Things happen all the time that completely rock the foundations of what people thought they had. And it's important for churches to be there for that. Because as you discussed in your video, religion actually does have a beneficial effect on warding off the worst effects of instability, you know, like things like PTSD, things like anxiety, all those sorts of things. If you're there for those people, you're really doing genuine good. And so, yeah, I just, that's kind of what I took away from your video was like, hey, if you're a religious person, like be ready, be ready for the tough times so that when they happen, you'll be there to help the people who need you, because this is something that religion is genuinely, like the evidence-based science and all that bears this out. It does have a measurably good effect. And I thought, that's pretty cool. Like, I want to be there for that. I want to be ready for that so that I obviously I don't hope the world takes a dark turn. I very much think the world is in a pretty good place. I'm kind of an anti-doomer, which is a rarity, I think, maybe in these times. But yeah, I think the world is pretty good. But yeah, I do want to be helpful if that changes. So that's the main thing for me.
That's great, and I'm happy to hear that perspective, because when I was making that video, I was hoping that perspective would not be lost on the audience, because I did make this, and with having a secular audience that has a subset of people who are like against religion or want to see religion fail or die out or whatever, I realized that a big thing that'd be taken from that video would be, hey, when people are really hurting, then they grasp onto religion, which shows that people don't believe in religion because it's true. They believe in it because they're desperate. And it's like, you can interpret it that way. You can also interpret it as this technology does actually have an effect, and it works especially for people who need it the most. And it's like you said, I mean, if we're in times of prosperity, like religiosity may go down, but when there's a time of prosperity, it seems like there's some kind of, it's like a boom and bust cycle. We boom for a while and there's a bust, and maybe religiosity will go up. But it is a tool that can be used when people are are hurting. So I think that, to me, like, that's an encouraging thing to hear you say, that like, okay, well, as a religious person, this is my responsibility to like keep this around so that when people need it, it's there. Like, we can accept people as soon as they need it. They ask for it, you know?
Yeah. Drew, have you ever played this game called Dark Souls? This is kind of a weird tangent, but
no, I mean, like, I guess I have heard of Dark Souls. I'm like, I think this meshes very well with me being an atheist. I'm kind of a Luddite. Like, I live like a very technology light life, basically. I don't really play video games.
Whoa, okay.
And,
that
you know,
hurts worse than you telling me you're... No, I'm just kidding.
No, I know. But I'm an atheist, which means that when it comes to social technology like religion, I'm also a Luddite. I don't use that technology either. But no, why does it remind you of Dark Souls
let me explain. Okay, so like in Dark Souls, there's this thing called a bonfire. So Dark Souls is a game about fighting monsters and making your way through this big, long, very difficult adventure. And if you lose, you return to a bonfire. Bonfires are like the safe place. They're where you go when the world gets really tough. And like you can invite people to the bonfire. Like if you find a lost person out in the world of Dark Souls, you can invite them to the bonfire, and that's like a safe spot for them. And sometimes you'll return to the bonfire and see, hey, one of the people that you like talked to and told them, hey, like there's a safe place for you, will be there. And that's a really cool moment. And like finding a new bonfire in Dark Souls is a really like, it's a huge relief. Because you just get through fighting hordes and hordes of crazy difficult monsters and all that. Anyway, I think you can probably see where I'm going with this. Like, I kind of feel similar about church. Like, the world is a tough place, even though I just said like the world's pretty good, and I do think that. Like it's still a dangerous place out there sometimes, and there are still people who are very much in need. And so I love when I see like someone out there who was in a tough spot, and then I see them at church. Like that's always really cool. And it's bonfires in Dark Souls are a place where you can like refresh, like you regenerate all your health and all that, and you get all your energy back, and you're ready to go on your next adventure. And that's kind of like, for me, that's kind of like a weekly like church isn't a place in space, although it kind of is, but it's a place in time for me as well. Like once a week I go there and I get refreshed and all that. And yeah, and so I just like, I think you kind of mentioned like keep something going. And yeah, I do kind of see it that way. Like in the same way that you have to like keep the bonfire going in Dark Souls, I do feel like a responsibility to keep the fire going in terms of a church, because it's a safe place that is comforting and is a place of safety for people who maybe feel like they have nowhere else to go, or feel lost in the world or whatever. So yeah, play Dark Souls, Drew. That's the real point of all this, is play Dark Souls.
Well, yeah, I can't guarantee that I'll heed that bit of advice. I have a really, really hard time sitting down to do activities. Like I have to be like moving. Okay. So like skating and disc golf are my two activities that I see. Okay. That I do the most.
Probably a healthier way to live than sitting in your chair playing games all day. That's what I do. But
well, it does. I mean, there are benefits to this. One of the most common comments I got on our collab was the bit of terminology that you use made no sense in in like gaming lingo. Like I mean, I had friends who played like League of Legends when I was in college, but like I didn't hang out with them because they only hung out with people who played League of Legends, And so I heard like some of these different things like
it is really interesting that you opted to make the sort of gamified video despite having very little actual experience with games. You pulled it off. Like I couldn't tell that you weren't a gamer. I thought you were a gamer for sure. So
hey, well, you didn't you say, like, I feel like I've heard you say somewhere that you got into tier list content because you were into Super Smash Brothers. I do play that. I've played that game for over 20 years. So that was my very first video game I ever played on the Nintendo 64, and I have actually never gone like more than maybe a month without playing that game. But
that's one of my favorites too, for sure. So I think it was one of my first games even on that 64. Yeah.
I wanted to get into kind of your your background, your science background here. I think that'll be something interesting for my audience.
Okay.
So what did you study? What did you want to do with your degree from college?
So what I wanted to do after college, I wanted to go to grad school, and then I wanted to work for the CDC as a disease detective. So, praise God that didn't happen, because that would have been right before COVID. So my life would have been a huge mess. So instead, I got to live a very relaxed, chill life, making content in perhaps the best time in history to ever make content, which was during a pandemic where everyone was sat at home doing nothing. So that was a huge blessing. And I mean that genuinely. But in college, I studied microbiology. I worked in a lab, and that was my whole life trajectory. That was what I really hoped to do. It was just be a scientist and all that.
In spaces like my comment sections, there's definitely this idea among certain people that like science and religion are always butting heads. They butt heads at all times. And like, if you're, very like scientifically minded, if you're a scientist, then like statistically, yes, you are less likely to be religious. But it's almost like if you're a scientist, if you do science, you're kind of like prohibited from being religious. And if you're religious, then like you're automatically anti-science. And you and I both know this is not true. I mean, there are definitely some serious science deniers who like are doing so because of like,
of course,
younger
those people definitely exist.
Stuff.
Like I've met plenty of those people, and that does
that's
happen,
a real thing.
Sure, but at the same time, I've worked in a few different science jobs. I think 3 total, and 2 of them were because I met a scientist at my church, and they like knew that I was into science too, and they were like, "Do you want to work with me?" My first was when I was in high school. I worked with an engineer who I was friends with, one of their sons, and he invited me to work with him and learn some basic engineering stuff and work on putting together devices and stuff, and that was really cool. And then in college, one of my friends worked in a molecular biology lab. And she went to my church, and she knew that I was a bum sophomore who had no job and was sat in his dorm playing video games most of the time. So she was like, "Do you want to work with me on this science project?" And this was a molecular biology, like genetics research sort of thing. We were doing pretty basic, like generic, well, not generic, but like ground level exploratory genetic research to like categorize different genes. This is honestly pretty boring work. It's work that like needs to be done, and you never know what's going to come from it. But if you describe it to people, they'll always be like, "Why? Why are you studying this? This doesn't seem important at all." And it might not be, but sometimes you make some of the biggest scientific breakthroughs imaginable through doing this kind of research. So that's some of what I did in college.
Later on, and this was, I want to say, like, I think I heard you say that this was around the time you were starting your channel. You were doing like food science, and this was not as great of an experience for you. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, sure. I worked at a jerky, like meat processing snack food company, and it was a fine job. But one of the things that I didn't like was that a lot of like the research that we were doing. I was a food scientist at this job, and like I figured that being a food scientist meant experimenting with ways on how to make the best food, right? I want to make something really, really bomb, something that everyone loves. They're like, "I can't get enough of this." But no, what really you end up doing is kind of trying to, you kind of have to deal with marketing all the time. And the marketing guys are always trying to keep tabs with whatever trends are happening in the general public, or like the customer base, I guess is what you'd call it. And a lot of that is just kind of catering to whatever beliefs that they have about like what's good to eat. And a lot of times we as food scientists would know that that's dead wrong, but we would have to do it anyway. We would have to make the food like worse in some ways just because this is what people wanted or thought they wanted. And this is what marketing was telling us, well, you got to do this because this is what sells. And that was always really disappointing to me because like we could be making the best beef jerky ever. That's what we could be spending our time on. But instead we're figuring out ways on how to take the MSG out of the beef jerky, which just makes it worse. So it was like, why are we doing this? This is such a waste of time, and we're wasting people's money, we're wasting people's time. We're not giving them anything healthier. It's not making it unhealthier, but it's not good. It's whatever. So it was just really disappointing. The big thing at that time, and I'm not sure if this is still the case, was like having as few ingredients as possible. You want things to label, like people check the labels, and people were all on the whole like, oh, look, this one has so many different ingredients. Why does peanut butter have 27 different ingredients or whatever? And like, I get the argument, I suppose, but a lot of times there were very good reasons for a lot of the things in there. But marketing would be like, no, okay, make this out of 3 different things. That's all we can put on the label. And it's like, this is so stupid. Now we're not even doing science. We're just wasting everyone's time and throwing things together and seeing what works. So I'm glad I got to escape that role. Like I'm not gonna grandstand and be like, oh, like I left because I'm just a superior to this or whatever. But I do feel blessed that I was able to do something that I'm more passionate about. So
yeah. So I remember hearing, I don't remember what the interview was, but it was probably around the time when I was about to ask you or was thinking of reaching out to see if you wanted to collab. I heard you on an interview talk about this and say that, you know, you felt like a lot of the stuff in your job, because you were just trying to follow the marketing, was like at best just kind of useless, and at worst it was actually dishonest. And you didn't like that was what you were doing. And so, yeah, you were very glad that you were able to step away from that. And like, you did go into a form of marketing, but the marketing that you did was like not morally problematic in any way.
I hope not.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And just for me, hearing that you had kind of done some of the moral calculus there and thought like, you know, I don't really want to be like, being a scientist is cool, but I don't really want to lie if I don't have to. So I'm really glad that I was able, like, financially to get away from that job. That made me think, okay, this is a good moral guy, and I think that we're going to get along. And so if it wasn't for you talking about your awful food science job, then maybe I wouldn't have asked you to collab.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that's showing through. Thanks, Drew. I never anticipated that random quote would come up in such a positive way later. But yeah, I do feel very blessed that I didn't have to do that forever, because it was very disappointing to do that all the time.
So you intended to go to grad school.
Yeah.
I also intended to go to grad school, and I thought it might be fun to kind of compare and contrast our experiences of intending on going and then not going to grad school, and why. So yeah, what did you want to do in grad school, and why didn't you end up doing that?
I didn't go because I got rejected. That's the long and short of it. I sent in a few applications to the professors that I really wanted to work with, and they shot me down, or they didn't accept me. I don't know if the professor even saw it. It might just be some acceptance committee or whatever. So I don't want to put that on them. But yeah, I put in a few. What I should have done is put in way more applications. I was very overconfident because I thought I was killing it. I was crushing it. Like, I had a budding YouTube channel, and I had done quite well at my job. Like, I'd gotten promoted at the food science job. Like, I didn't start out as a food scientist. I was just some lackey goon who did the dirty work, but they promoted me. So I thought, like, oh, I got a pretty killer resume for a guy who's been out of college for 1 year. So I only applied to 2 places, which is very prideful of me to do. But I picked my 2 favorite professors to work with, sent in the applications, and they were like, we're rejecting you. What I wanted to do, the main professor I wanted to work with does research on ants. He does microbiology research with ants, which is really fascinating stuff. I don't know if he still does this. I haven't followed up with it, but yeah, in 2017, about that time, he was studying leafcutter ants, which are these really fascinating ants that they cut leaves, but they collect leaves, they cut them off of trees and everything, and then they bring them into their nest, their hive, and then they grow fungus using these leaves, which is really fascinating. But on their cuticle, on their bodies, their carapace, they have these symbiotic microorganisms which offer them protection from other infectious disease, which is really fascinating and an awesome example of ecology and evolutionary biology linking up and symbiosis and all that. But it's also a really interesting avenue for drug discovery, for trying to figure out new antibiotics. Because I don't know if you know this, but we're kind of running out of antibiotics to treat bacterial infections, which is scary because this is one of the advancements in medical technology that most prolonged human life, and warded off a lot of preventable death. So it would be a real shame if we ran out of those. So I think he's doing really important research in trying to keep that going and find new antibiotics that are novel and that can get around antibiotic resistance. So yeah, I really wanted to work with him, and it just wasn't in the cards, I guess. But to be honest, I think that was, I already said it, I think it's very much a blessing because, I don't think... Do you know any grad students who are having a good time? Because I don't. Every grad student I've ever met is miserable. So
yeah, I have to say I have actually hired grad students to work on my channel, in New Testament studies, and they're I'll do this word count for this amount of money, and I'm like, I'll go ahead and pay you double that because that's not a lot of money for that much work. No, you're right.
Good on you.
I don't know grad students who are having a good time typically, and I think that you've probably you've worked a lot, you've been on your grind a lot, but you've probably also had a lot of fun doing what you're doing, right?
Oh yeah. The YouTuber life is a banger. I see you growing up. You would talk. What do you want to do when you grow up, right? And there would be lists of what's the top job, right? For me, it was astronaut, doctor, all that stuff, and that's a hard life. Those jobs, those aspirations. I mean, the light at the end of that tunnel is dim, is what I would say.
Yeah.
There's really not that much fun to be had. I'm sure it is a rewarding career for those who do that, but it's a tough journey, right? Now, you ask kids today what they want to do, they're like, I want to be a YouTuber. And I'm like, yeah, you do want to be a YouTuber because it's a good time. You're right. Chase that dream. So
I did have a little cousin of mine find out that I was a YouTuber, and he was like, so do you have a bunch of Teslas, a whole garage of Teslas? And I was like, no.
If only he's like, it's so easy. Yeah.
Do you know Logan Paul? And I'm like, I don't think Logan Paul would be interested in working with me, and I probably wouldn't be interested in working with him, and that's okay. We don't do the same thing.
Yeah, no. You're not interested in working with scammers trying to sell crypto to people and all that.
Yeah, no, I'd rather work with, the best of the best educational YouTubers here,
Well, and grad students, right? You can cast out your line and reel in the grad students and pull them into a better line of work.
Absolutely. Right. So I also intended to get into grad school, and I wanted to be a licensed professional counselor. My degree is in counseling psychology, and I actually did get into the master's program at the school where I did my undergrad. And this was it wasn't like a Bible college. It was a full-fledged university that just happened to be Christian, evangelical Christian, very conservative. And I had good grades and some extracurriculars and things like that. And so I was accepted in, but that was despite the dean of psychology saying that she really didn't want me to be in the master's program. And the reason that she gave was that she had received a vision from God that said that I was not to be a master's student and that I had some sort of issues in my life that I needed to work out before I was ready to do this. I will say that does sound a certain way. That sounds like I was like, oh, I was getting away from the faith and like maybe God told her. I actually did speak with her about this, and she said that she knew that I had scheduled all of my classes to be in the afternoons, the best that I could, or at least after 10 a.m., and that a godly man wakes up before the sun.
Ooh. That hurts me because I stay up till like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. every day, and then I wake up at like 10:30 or 11.
Yeah, same here. So I guess I got in, but the reason I didn't complete my master's was my parents and I just ran out of money. Like the money just wasn't there.
Okay.
And I'm okay that I didn't end up doing that. See our comments about grad school, but
right, yeah, she was doing you a favor. She was trying to get you out of that and save me some time and money.
But was it God's will that I did not end up completing grad school, and instead went and did social work for like 3 years, and then ended up being a YouTuber? That's my question.
Well, I think you can decide that for yourself. I would say that there was a plan for you, and I think you've turned up. I think you have benefited from said plan. But either way, I would say, I mean, we were talking about grad students. Grad students don't have a good time. I mean, I don't know. Do you feel like you've the direction that you ended up going in life was good? Do you like where you're at?
Yeah, I do have to say I am glad that I didn't end up going into counseling, like getting my full certification to be a counselor. And at the same time, though, I am glad that I did the jobs that I did rather than spending that time in grad school, because I worked in a Christian homeless shelter and ran the youth department in a Christian homeless shelter for my first 6 months out of college.
Okay.
And then after that, I worked in a behavioral hospital, and I was a supervisor of a group home for basically troubled kids that are in and out of foster care.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
And
sounds like you did a lot of very noble work instead of grad school then.
Hey, that when you're raised in like a family of missionaries like I was, it's like if you're going to get a career and it's not like missions work, that's what you did.
Okay.
I
come from a family of doctors, so it was very different for me. They were very much like, you gotta be a doctor. You want to go to be a professor or be a medical doctor, one of those things. So, but they were still very supportive of me. My not to say that my parents weren't encouraging when I told them I was going to be a YouTuber or whatever. So
eventually it did work out, and I think you and I are both very happy with our careers now. But I want to give you a special career opportunity here.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions as a Christian for an atheist, or any like topics you want to bring up? Christian v atheist type stuff. If there's any time for this, then now is the time.
Okay. Well, how much time? That's the question. But I do have a list of questions that I wrote down. And they're not like Christian versus atheist or anything like that. But I am curious what you think about these as an atheist.
Sure.
I ask a lot of my atheist friends these questions. So the first one, I'm actually surprised. I don't think I've heard you talk about this on your channel. But what do you think happens after you die?
I mean, I think that my answer comes from the idea that I don't think that any type of like prolonged consciousness or consciousness external to the brain and like the physical elements of the brain has been demonstrated sufficiently to say that like it goes somewhere or something else happens. I think that it's the same as before you're born, most probably. Like, I don't think that I can say with certainty, like, this is definitely what happens. But most likely it's probably that there's no experience to be had. And yeah, you are out of there. Nothing happens, basically.
Okay. That lines up pretty much with what the answer I get from other atheist friends that I have. And my follow-up question, or I guess response, is specifically on the like before you were born thing, right? Because yeah, you don't remember what it was like before you were born. And so it's like, okay, maybe it's just like that. My question is, do you remember what it was like to be 1 year old? Because
Yeah, no,
I mean,
no,
you were
definitely
alive,
not.
right? But
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's like, and the suggestion there is that, well, you could have some kind of conscious experience that you didn't remember, like it's possible your brain goes through different
Maybe.
states, and yeah. I mean, for me it seems like when a brain goes from consciousness to like not having consciousness anymore, having awareness to not having any kind of awareness or experience anymore, at least as far as we can tell, what has happened is usually a physically observable phenomenon. Like the reason why this person isn't responding anymore is because there's no oxygen going to their brain, or their brain is not firing any kind of electrical signals or anything like that. With a 1-year-old, yeah, you can see all of the physical manifestations of what we might call like conscious experience happening. It's just that they're not good at recording memories. So that's how I would think about that.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I always just thought it was an interesting thought. Like maybe I was around before I was born, and it's just that I don't remember it.
It's really, I mean, it's like, it's not that I wouldn't want something like that to happen. I mean, it's really cool, and if there was some kind of thing that I felt like was really convincing of that, then it would be very, very exciting. It's just that most of the time, not always, but most of the time when people have presented me evidence, it's like, well, the thing you're presenting me is coming from like not a scientist and not experimentation, and you also are coming from such and such religious institution, and you don't really have a robust body of work, and you like showing me this. This doesn't.
Yeah,
this
true.
seems to be a like you're trying to make a religious statement through the language of science. I'd rather you just make a religious statement through religious language and philosophical language. I think that's like more honest and straightforward. If there's ever like good hard evidence of it, that'd be really fun. I hope you send it to me.
Fair. Well, so that was my next question actually was if you had to pick, you said some of them sound fun. Like if there was a religion, if you couldn't pick atheism or agnosticism or whatever, or pluralism, or I don't know, if you had to pick one religion, did you have a favorite that you like hope is real actually, like you'd find out after you die?
Man, it's kind of tough. It's like, I think that the best one might be a universalist version of Christianity. So one where no torment happens. Yeah, like maybe some people are completely like eliminated, but ultimately a reality where everyone is redeemed and sanctified and becomes like has an incorrupted nature. Like they don't have like they don't do bad stuff. Like they have no desire to do anything bad or harmful to anybody else. And then they also live in paradise forever. That sounds good, like a universalist form of Christianity. That said, I tend to think that a form of religion where people experience eternal conscious torment those forms of religion are usually less preferable than like what I think now.
Than just
like
the
just
dark void
annihilation.
Yeah.
I mean, some forms of Buddhism are kind of interesting, but at the same time, like the Buddhist project is often not existing anymore. Like the whole concept is you want to break free from this cycle of suffering that results from reincarnation. So Christians will be like, I'm seeking eternal life, and Buddhists will be like, I'm seeking death. And both of those things are seen as like the ultimate the ultimate thing a human can achieve, the ultimate good. But yeah, from my perspective, universalist Christianity, or I guess it could be Islam or Judaism, most popular in Christianity. I'd say that's probably the most preferable system. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. For myself, if I couldn't pick Christianity, turns out that was all wrong. If if I died and turns out Christianity was not legit, but Hinduism or like some sort of reincarnation was, I think I'd be cool with that. That'd be fine with me. I talked to a Hindu at the Streaming Awards. Actually, he's another creator on YouTube. He told me that his daughter was a cobra in the past life. Yeah. And I thought that was cool. I was like, man, like, all right. How did you figure that out? Or like how did they get from there to here? What does a cobra do? Like, there's so many questions I had. Yeah, I just think it's a fascinating worldview that, and plus like kind of from the realm of like my videos of like talking about, like what's your next playthrough going to be, right? Like, you're going to pick a different build, So some of it's like, so what would it be like to play as a totally different a character,
So what character would you pick? What build would you pick?
If I couldn't pick a human, I think I would pick a parrot. I think parrots are really, they got a good thing going. They can fly. They're really smart. They live a long time. They have social groups. They can like use tools and stuff. So I think, parrots have a good thing going. Being a parrot sounds pretty chill to me. So
yeah, I get that. I get that. I like that. And it also kind of brings up, you were saying, or I was saying like, well, what happened before you were born? Like, you didn't experience anything.
Yeah.
I've also had Buddhist friends who, believe in reincarnation, and they're like, no, I totally have memories from my past life. So you saying like what happened before you were born? It's like, well, I was someone else.
Sure.
And so that's, it's interesting to play around with, at least.
It is. Yeah. Okay. Last question. This is something I am very curious because this is contentious among atheists. Do you believe in free will?
Oh, yeah. This is when you really get into like, how much time do we have here?
Right.
Like, how do you define free will? Because people will define it in different ways.
You're asking me how I define it? I would say, I like the ability to make choices that you otherwise would not have, I guess.
So the ability to make choices, I guess my best question I can ask to try to get a definition here and answer the question accurately is, does free will entail some sort of agent making a choice that is completely and totally unconstrained and undetermined by prior inputs? So is there something like in a person, in your idea of free will, is free will like a decision generator that has absolutely no ties to any prior effect within the universe?
Yeah, that's a tough one too, I guess. I would say probably yes. I do think we have the ability to like weigh choices in our head and like make one. So like, I don't know, it kind of gets into, like a different way to frame it is like you see someone do a thing, like make a decision for their life, like I don't know who to marry or like what college to go to or what job to do, or like whether or not to quit their job or whatever, and you look back and think, well, that was the wrong choice. You messed that one up. And the question is like, could they have done anything different? Did they ever have the possibility of doing something else? I would say yes, but yeah, maybe that involves some sort of extra, I don't know, extra dimensional or extra reality force. I don't know what that means from a science perspective, but yeah. What do you think? Could you make a different choice than one you made in the past? Did you ever have an option?
It's difficult because I agree that we do have experience of choosing, of making decisions. If you were to ask me, like, can people make decisions? Do they actually make decisions? Like, does a human have the ability to actually choose? I'd say yes. Mm-hmm. And they're like, okay, so you're not a determinist. And I'm like, well, no, I just think that the agent, that we have, the ability to choose, is made up of stuff that exists within the universe, and everything that exists within the universe is an effect of a cause, and every cause is the effect of another cause, and there's an infinite regress basically of causality. Like maybe there's a point where that stops. I don't know, but within this discussion of whether a human can make a choice, I think that the machinery that we have in our head to make choices, you can call it illusory or not. What is an illusion? We have to define that. I don't know. Yeah. It does exist. It's just that I think that agent, that ability to choose, is made up of physical materials, and there is an emergent property that we would call like consciousness or the ability to choose or whatever. But it is all a result of physical stuff, and all that physical stuff is the result of, chemical and physical processes that put it in place. So do we have the ability to choose? Yes. Is there something extra dimensional or extra, reality going on there? I don't think so. I'm open to the idea that there is, but I'm not really sure how one demonstrates that there is some sort of mechanism that exists outside of the universe going on, like in our heads when we make choices, when all we can really observe is the universe itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it definitely entails some element of faith to believe in free will as well. So
yeah, and it's like, does this mean that I don't believe in free will? You can hear my answer and decide whether or not you think that. Some people have called me like a compatibilist. Some people have called me a determinist. Some people have been like, oh no, you totally believe in free will. Like, I don't think you need the extra dimensional bit of it to believe in free will. You believe in it just like I do. So it's really about definitions, I think, when it comes right down to it.
Well, that's cool. I ask because in addition to watching like atheist YouTubers like yourself, sometimes I watch like determinist, I guess, YouTubers. I've seen like some interviews with Sam Harris, and then there's another YouTuber, her name is Sabine Hossenfelder. She's made a few videos about free will, and I always found those very challenging. Like, oh, how do I wrestle with this question? This is a new one, so I like doing that. So I'm curious your take as well. But that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you, giving me a shot on that one, and I also really respect that you like to challenge yourself and, just like challenge yourself to keep learning. I think that that's a good quality for people to have, and I wish that was more common, actually.
Well, thanks. I enjoy doing it, so I can't take too much credit. I just think it's fun. But yeah, I like to say, all right, which worldview is gonna knock me on my butt today? I don't know. So,
all right, final question here that I hadn't communicated to you about prior.
Whoa, surprise question, Drew. I don't know about
any
this.
way that we can get any sort of sneak peek on like what you're working on, like what projects do you have cooking right now? Can you say?
I could definitely say. I've got a few different things in the work. On TierZoo, my main YouTube channel, I'm working on a few different videos. I'm working on one about centipedes and myriapods in general, so like millipedes, centipedes, and then there's a few other straggler genuses in there, but mostly just those two. I'm doing one about crows, which kind of like parrots, very intelligent animals. There's a lot of really fun videos of them like kind of trolling other animals in a really fun way, like pecking at them and getting them to attack each other, and I think those videos are a lot of fun. So I'm really excited to showcase that sort of behavior on my channel. And then in addition to that, I have a side channel called Chaos Corp, which is a game show channel. We did a whole season of a show called Duelist Mansion, which is a Yu-Gi-Oh show, an unofficial Yu-Gi-Oh show, where I got a bunch of my friends to come to a mansion, and we played a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh games, and then I animated those games in what I hope is a fun and interesting way. The reason I bring that up is because we're working on season 2 right now. We're filming it next week. We're going to do a Dungeons and Dragons themed game show. So I'm really, really stoked for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. So there you go. That's a sneak peek for you.
Yeah, awesome. I never played Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid, but Dungeons and Dragons is of interest to me. So
There
season
you
two
go.
might actually appeal to me even more.
Now, did you not play Yu-Gi-Oh growing up because you were not allowed to? Was this a religious, contentious thing for you?
Yes,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, there were like Egyptian gods and stuff like that in this, and so my
Whoa,
parents thought
that's what
it
did
was
it. Wow, that
yeah.
is fascinating. Okay, I mean there totally are. I remember my parents were chill with it, and to be honest, I'm kind of surprised they were. Maybe they just didn't really know what we were
Yeah.
doing. But I remember some of the neighborhood kids growing up. They were Catholic, and I remember one time I went to like this Catholic kid's birthday party. And one of his friends gave him a Yu-Gi-Oh card pack, and his mom like came in and like ripped it up, like threw it away after he'd opened it. And I remember he opened like a pretty cool card, and I was so sad seeing her like just toss it in the trash.
Wait,
But
so
that's funny.
did you swoop in and pick up that card since you liked it? You're like, hey, can I have?
No, it was destroyed. I couldn't do it. It was gone.
That's sad. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm happy for both of our sakes that Yu-Gi-Oh is on the table for us both. But yeah, I'm excited for the D&D theme there.
Cool. Thanks. I hope you like it.
All right. Well, hey, thanks very much for coming on and chatting with me.
Okay.
Maybe one day there will be another idea that makes sense for us to both work on. And yeah, until then,
Yeah,
I'm
Ivy.
definitely going to keep tuning in to all your stuff.
Thanks. Likewise.